Welcome to Trauma Recovery Anonymous, the podcast. My name is Richard, and I am your host. My podcast focuses on the 39% of people who are misdiagnosed with mental disorders. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't go back to the person they were, and they've just found out that they've been diagnosed with a condition for years that was wrong. And now they have to find some other way out of their demise. And so I focus on looking for teachers, people with wisdom, experts who can offer some solution that maybe you can tap into that can help you get to a place of sanity, since you found the mental health didn't work and your best efforts before didn't work. And so I have a speaker on today who's going to talk about his own experiences with trauma and adversity, but also he's going to later on talk about everything's achieved in recovery, to know that you too can rise from the ashes like a phoenix and achieve greatness in your life. So that'll be later on, but for now we're going to be focusing on what he mainly focuses on. Before I go that, my second audience are the young people who have been diagnosed with mental disorders, believing that their feelings and emotions are mental disorders. I believe that's a crime against mankind and a sin against God. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Jeremy to introduce himself to the audience and to share a bit about himself. Jeremy, please.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So to share a little bit about myself, I had kind of a typical youth. I grew up being a little bit introverted, a little bit nerdy, an outcast, so to speak. I wasn't one of the cool, popular kids. My dad's from Scotland, so I had a little bit of a different spin. I played soccer, and it was tough growing up through life. And I encountered all kinds of adversity. I had a few big downs in my life that I would consider traumatic moments that really shaped my life into being what it is today.
Thank you very much. Before I start, in life, we know generally that there's three responses to danger: fight, flight, and freeze. And then a mental health professional came up with a fourth one called fawn. And I believe as a kind of now I'm what they call a practicing Christian. I don't do church. I'm not a member of any denomination or any man-made religion, but I believe in God and I believe there's a creator and he created us. And if we can call on a power outside of ourselves for help, we can get through almost anything. And so I believe that the other two responses we have are faith and acceptance. Now what happens is when we're children, when we're suffering from any dysfunctional family upbringing, we're stuck in freeze or fawn. That's the only thing a child can do. They can basically disassociate, go to their place of fantasy. A big one for me was I'd go to meet John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and be a cowboy, or I'd go into science fiction and go off to some fantasy world. And while the commotion's going on around me, I'd feel safe in that space. So this association was a very healthy response for me as a child. Also, sleeping, playing, shutting down mentally, emotionally, play dead, faint, hibernate, all those kind of escapes. And then the fawn was people-pleasing, playing happy families, allowing people to walk all over me, pretending I'm okay when I clearly wasn't on these practices. But what happens is when we grow up, what worked for us as children doesn't work when we're adults, and we make the mistake of staying in those responses of freeze and fawn into our adulthood, and everything falls apart. And we have to find out a way of embracing the fight, flight, faith, and acceptance. The fight is basically not so much fighting anybody. Like yourself, Jeff, I wasn't a big fighter, I was kind of a scaredy cat. But fighting can also mean asking for help, going to your best friend, your mum or dad, saying, if you feel anxious, what do you do? How do you cope? And then copying them. That's the best way of fight. Flight is just leave the room. If you're not comfortable in this chat with myself and Jeremy, and it's triggering you, just leave your PC, go outside and go downstairs and watch TV and go for a walk and come back later and watch it later. It's okay to walk away. The fate is, forget where the chicken or the egg came first, except there is a God. He cares about you. He wants you to be happy, but it has to be on his terms, not on your terms. So you have to maybe practice prayer, meditation, journaling, reflecting, all that kind of stuff, but find a way of feeding your soul. And the fourth one is acceptance. Shit happens. You're not the target. It's not all about you. If I say something to offend Jeremy, I'm not out to offend Jeremy. Just the fact that he's offended doesn't mean I was attacking him. It just happened that he was collateral damage to my beliefs and my thoughts. Same if Jerry and I say something today and you don't agree with us, we're not out to attack you. We're just sharing our opinions. And it's about us expressing our needs to be heard and not an attack on you. And if you can learn this one above all, it'll change your whole life. So I'm going to ask Jeremy very quickly to talk about his non-traditional background. It's a really cool one. I think most kids feel we come from homes and everyone else has wonderful homes and we have a difficult upbringing. So Jeremy, would you jump in there and maybe help the audience understand they're not alone?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background continues from where I started. Not being welcomed into the cool class of all the popular kids in school, I strived for that. And, as I got older, I started going to summer school and I started meeting some of the cooler kids and I started smoking pot and I started going out to parties and I started to kind of be accepted into that whole world. And, being the nerdy Catholic kid that was very conservative, now I was changing into this other person. And, throughout my life, as I got into my 20s, I got independence. I lived on my own. I started selling drugs out of my house. And this changed my life completely. I became like a popular person, like a cool person. It really all happened all the way that I dreamed, but it wasn't what I had always envisioned. There's a lot of baggage that comes along with all those good things that make you this popular person. So, I may have had all these friends and I may have been going to all these parties, but some people were looking at me as prey, as a potential victim. And so I had people that broke into my house and robbed me. Eventually I was home invaded and held up at gunpoint. I mean, we were partying. I was selling all kinds of drugs. They wanted the drugs. They wanted the money. And they didn't care about all these other things. And so these were extremely traumatic moments. I kind of skipped over a moment when I was younger. I had a girlfriend that was dating one of my other friends, and all my friends abandoned me all at the same time. And so that left me without my friend group that I had originally growing up. And I only had her, and I dated her for a while, and I clinged on to her. And I struggled a lot with making friends. And so that also filled into that part of my life, because selling drugs and partying and doing all that stuff was a way to kind of bridge that gap that I had lost in those, teen and years in my 20s.
Because I have to say, by the way, you shared a phrase there that I know the skin and the hair in the back of my head was raised when you said clingy to the girlfriend. Like, we get very codependent and we're looking for everybody else to make us feel right. So selling the drugs was a way of making us feel superior and maybe like fitting in and doing drugs and doing alcohol and all the things we do, thinking that we will become a part of society. We think as society. But the clinging is like being dependent on everyone else to meet my needs, to fulfill my needs of self-acceptance and self-worth. If I have a girlfriend, if I have whatever, if I'm a part of this or part of that, it's something I think that the audience can identify with, is that sense of clinginess. And for me, I remember going to Codependency Anonymous, CODA, to learn about clinginess and how not to be dependent, to have boundaries, to let other people live, to live and let live, and to not expect other people to fix life for me. And again, that kind of stuff, we're going to get to recovery in a little while, but you're sharing about adversity, and I think you've had trauma in your life as well, which maybe you've spoken about already. But again, I don't want to dwell on the trauma. I'm not looking to trigger you or trigger anybody else. The goal of this program is to find solutions. So you can we get to share about you had adversity and trauma and whatever, but then, and then being home invaded and being taken as a hostage and being a victim. But then out of that, you rose like a phoenix. And so we're going to get to that in a minute. But again, if you want to share a bit more about your adversity and trauma, just to validate or acknowledge that did happen. And then I'll ask you to talk about how you rose like a phoenix. What did you do, and where'd you go for help, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I had one other extremely challenging thing kind of happen during this time too, where my health started to fail me. And so I was in my young 20s and I started having all kinds of stomach problems and pain. And food allergies essentially. And I didn't even know that it was food triggered for a long time. So I'd be kind of eating and doing the same things that I was doing and having all these problems from it. I'm sure doing the drugs didn't help. And I was fortunate to be doing not, a lot of the drugs that I was doing were psychedelics, and I did MDMA and things that I could see actually some value from these drugs too. I did cocaine, and I did like some meth and a lot of other drugs where I don't really see a lot of value from those drugs. And those were extremely hard on my health. And so all of these things combined made my young life extremely challenging in so many ways that was unique, because other people would be just kind of fine in their health and ability to do things. And I would have to always consider my health, all these other things, these factors in my life. I became dependent on smoking pot because of this pain in my stomach. And so now if I was going to travel anywhere or do anything, well, was I going to be able to have pot there? And how would I be able to use that? And that became a huge factor in all the things that I was doing. And I just kind of went throughout life experiencing all these things. And then in my own business, so I'll kind of give a little bit of a good, shining, happy part, but then it became bad too. So after all of this partying and all these things, I moved to Hollywood and I changed my life a little bit. I still sold and smoked pot, but I stopped partying in the way that I was in my younger days. And I started kind of following some of my passions. And I was writing for a MMA website, mixed martial arts, UFC, right? Yeah. During those old days, it was very underground. And so there was an opportunity to do things in that world, and I was doing them. And a cannabis publication that was brand new from Canada saw what I was doing and offered me an opportunity to write for them. So I started writing for this magazine, and that opened all these doors in this world of cannabis that was emerging in California. And that gave me a career in cannabis for a while. And so I did all these things in the cannabis world that gave me notoriety. And I was able to kind of start producing events. And those events I started feeling was very special. We were documenting them. I paid a film crew to film these events. And I learned through this process of how to make documentaries. And it was a long process, but ultimately that led to me becoming a documentary journalist. And that's what I am now. But there was a time there where I was producing those cannabis events, and I thought my identity was in the cannabis world. And the reason I had hired this film crew was to highlight the events, to popularize these events. And then they started to lose popularity, and then regulations were coming into the cannabis world. So I lost my career in cannabis. And so this high that I had achieved and this person that I had become, it was kind of cut from under me. I had no direction. I got this career in cannabis. Nobody wanted to hire me to do anything else. It was essentially like I had no job to most other professions. And even in the cannabis world, they didn't see a value as me as an event producer for some reason. I didn't have the education and the typical things that were needed to get those kind of jobs. So I was extremely lost for maybe 5-ish years, where I was paying a lot of attention to things that could help get me out of this, what I saw as maybe depression. Yeah. And eventually I was able to kind of get myself out of that and follow my dreams of being a documentary journalist. And through all of that, event production came back to me just when I had given up on it. And so now I also produce an event in the cannabis world again. And wow, really interesting how it's all come full circle.
I love these stories of rising like a phoenix out of the ashes. For most of us who suffer with trauma or feelings, we can feel so hopeless and so less than, and there's no hope for us to ever have a normal life again. I suffered depression for probably about 2 years. It wasn't long like some people, but in those 2 years, I felt so soul destroyed. In my lifetime, I've attempted suicide 3 times, and that hasn't been for 20 years now. But by last time, I realized I didn't want to die. My problem was I didn't want to live. It wasn't if I wanted to die, I didn't want to live. I felt so hopeless, so full of despair and depression. But then again, I had that spiritual moment when I rise like a phoenix out of the ashes, and here I am today. I'm hosting a podcast. I'm a trauma recovery coach. Like you couldn't write the script for who I was to who I am today. And like yourself, you come from being like a nerd and a geek, and no one fits in nowhere and whatever. And suddenly you're a documentary journalist, and it's like you put these two people side by side in two pictures. You kind of go, they can't be the same person. Like we have the ability, I believe anyone who's ever been touched by any trauma, that we are like what I call God's soldiers. That if you look at the Bible, when Jesus walked the earth, he found people who were less than whatever, and he exalted them to be giants amongst men. All the 12 apostles were nobody. They were fishermen, they were carpenters and accountants and whatever, blah, blah. And he gave them and he raised them to a state where they were like giants among men. They achieved greatness. And I think God does choose us, that we suffer a terrible hardship on this earth through trauma or through unconventional upbringing or a dysfunctional home or something, but we don't give up. We're still standing. And certainly 10, 20 years later, you're a documentary journalist. I'm a trauma coach. Someone else is a doctor, or someone's get married and have kids. I love the idea of, this podcast we're doing today. I mean, if one person takes hope from your words today, Germany, and they decide to live their life, and they grow up and they have kids, and maybe in 2 or 3 generations, one of their descendants creates a cure for cancer or AIDS, we'll never get the accolades. No one will ever know the part we played, but God will know, and that's all that matters. And that's why I keep doing these podcasts. If one person loves what Jeremy says today and changes and turns over and starts a new life and rises like a phoenix, just maybe, they may be the second coming of Jesus. It might be one of their line that produces the second coming of Jesus. They may create a cure for cancer or AIDS. What we do isn't a small thing. I mean, I love this thing. I'm going to leave Jeremy speak very shortly, but I love the idea that we are nobodies. I really, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but we're not professionals. We're not doctors or mental health professionals. Although I have many mental professionals on my show, but we're not ego-driven big people in the world. We're just ordinary people who have a message to carry, and we hope that our message can reach that one person who can have the descendants that can create a cure for cancer or AIDS. And Jeremy coming on, talking about being a nerd and a geek, which was as true where he came from to where he is today, and me coming from where trying to commit suicide 3 times and having depression to here being a trauma coach. These are to show you that all is not lost, that you can change at any moment. Because I really want to stress that for the audience. You can start your life over today. You can just decide today, okay, I'm going to die to my old life. I'm going to start my new life. Jeremy, back to you. Sorry, I've spoken too long. It's meant to be your podcast, not mine. Please have a share there.
Well, I agree. And, when I was lost in my adult years, I was able to really pay attention to what got me out of those problems. When I was younger, it was more about just kind of moving forward, and I didn't really have a knowledgeable base from where I was looking at those situations and what I was going through emotionally. And I dealt with those things the way that I did, and I did overcome those experiences. But in my adult years, I paid a lot of attention to what really had helped me. And I also worked on some projects that kind of pointed out some of these things. So I have a mindfulness documentary, and I have a documentary about kind of your mind and clearing cluttered thoughts. And it's also about Buddhism and some of those kind of fundamentals. And what I noticed was there were certain things that really helped me. Forgiving myself was one of the really important ones. Having something that I was working on, that I was making progress at, whether it was just advancing in a video game or anything that you can make progress on so that you can feel good about those things. Talking about your past and being honest about your accomplishments and your failures, being grateful for those accomplishments. It's really easy to kind of think about how many things are going bad for you. But if you can challenge yourself to think about, somebody that you think had it worse than you, and that might make you appreciate some of your life. And then as you start to think about the things that are good, that you are happy for, those are really, really wonderful things. In mindfulness, there was a practice called the loving kindness practice. And that was about thinking about people that had been good to you in your life and then wishing them good in their life. That's such a really, really positive thing. And there's all kinds of little mental hurdles that you can kind of do that will eventually get you on the right path. And then once you are on that right path and you're making progress and you're, having more success, all of a sudden you'll look back and you'll realize, oh, wow, I'm not depressed. And it's not a one-day thing where you're like, oh, yesterday I was depressed and today I'm not. You just kind of all of a sudden realize, I've escaped those negative feelings that were, capturing so many moments in my life.
Brilliant. It's all about we talk about habitual. Science tells us that to break an old habit, we have to replace it with a new habit 66 times. 66 times. Sorry, I can't pronounce my S's properly. So it's a really cool thing. There's a Christian practice where you think of a person, you say, "May God bless you, and I'm grateful you're in my life," and you choose to just pick 100 people. So your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your granny, your granddad, your great granny, your great granddad, if you can remember them, your friends from school, your favorite teacher. Find 100 people to say, I pray that God blesses you, and I'm grateful you're in my life. And even if you hate the person, just say 100 people. Make a list of 100 people and just do that. And do that every day. What will happen is your attitude to them will change. Your feeling about yourself will change. And again, whether it's the Buddha way or the Hindu way, bless somebody and say you're grateful for them. And it'll change. And then again, like yours, likewise, I want to bless you, Richard. I'm grateful that you're doing this work today, Richard. Talk to yourself. It's okay. You can do that. Sometimes we don't allow ourselves to give ourselves a pat on the back. And the fact that you're here today listening to Jeremy on this podcast, you probably listen to me too much, but listen to Jeremy on this podcast, you're giving yourself a gift. And that's all you can do today is to do something in this hour that's going to benefit you. Jeremy.
Yes. Did you ask a question?
No, I just wanted to call you and to jump in and say something there because I can get lost in my own thoughts.
Oh, well, I can absolutely jump in. You were talking about a lot of the same things that I believe. And I think you have to pay attention to what your thoughts are. If you're constantly having negative thoughts, then it's very likely you're going to have a negative life. But if you can replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts, then you can have a positive life. And I really do think it's that simple in a lot of ways. And if you are being the victim of your own thoughts, you have to try and find practices and things that can kind of change that and distract you and maybe give you other things to think about, or maybe take away that focus that's kind of drifting off to that negative place. And I think the more you can separate from that, the more you can be in control of your thoughts. And once you are in control of your thoughts, where I'm at now, I feel very, very positive and powerful, like no one could shake me. That, I may face tremendous adversity in the future, but my struggles have given me this power that I could never have achieved without them. And so I'm grateful for all the hurdles and terrible adversities that I've had to face growing up. And it's made me a better person overall.
Oh, brilliant. You said you're a Buddhist. I'm a Christian. So there's a practice in Christianity I want to share. And then if you have something similar in Buddhism, you might share too. So at least our audience can have a choice to use. And it's basically, like you said, we have to change our thinking. But you can't just decide now I'm going to be happy when you've been depressed for years. It doesn't work that way. You have to find a way of replacing. So what you do is you say, up until this morning, I felt terribly depressed. But coming onto this podcast today and listening to Jeremy talk about this, and we realize that my thinking is kind of my worst enemy. I'm going to choose to declare, whether I feel it or not, I'm happy, joyous, and free. and then say that 10 times a day, every day for 30 days. And by day 10, you won't recognize yourself. Is there such a prayer, such a kind of an idea in Buddhism or in your own experience that you could share?
So I'm not a Buddhist. I did do a documentary on Buddhism, and I grew up Catholic, but I'm not really practicing anymore. But I do feel like I learned a lot of lessons in morality from religion that are important. And as I've done some of these other things on alternative medicines and other stories, I've encountered other religious themes. And I think there's a really positive theme that seems to be common in a lot of religions, and that is, kind of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? You want to treat people in a positive way because you know what it's like to be treated in a negative way. And I think that adversity is a big part of all different religions. And there's different ways that they kind of teach you to deal with that adversity. Sometimes you're praying to a saint or God himself or Jesus or Mary or, someone in the world of Catholicism. In Buddhism, a lot of it is internal, where you're not necessarily praying, but you're meditating on things and you're thinking about concepts in a more wider, open-minded way. And I think a lot of it is all just taking into account that this life is very similar for all of us humans, no matter where your background is or what you're doing. And nobody really knows what is in the future. I do a lot of strange topics where people talk about these concepts, but nobody knows. And so we're all just trying to figure it out together. And happiness seems to be a very common thing. You want happiness for yourself. You don't want to hurt people. You want these same things for the people that you love. And this is a common theme amongst all races and religions and nationalities and everyone. And I think that if we could focus on the things that unite us as a people, that would be a lot better than all these things that seem to separate us and give us negative thoughts and experiences.
Wonderful. Okay, Jeremy, I'm going to ask you to tell the audience about what you've achieved in your recovery. So,
absolutely.
You've rise like a phoenix out of the ashes from where you came from, being that geeky nerd, to where you are today. Some of your achievements, some of your awards. I look at your profile and I'm like, how could this guy have done so much in such a short space of time?
Sure. So like that little kid I would cry when people would talk to me. I kind of became the star of many childhood shows where I was like the school play. I was one of the stars of the school play, and people kept giving me these opportunities to shine. And throughout my life, this has kind of been a theme. I didn't think that I would ever become in the film world that I am. But, being on stage at a young age gave me a little bit of a taste of all of that kind of stuff. And now I achieved this identity in the cannabis world where I was almost like a celebrity, maybe a D-list celebrity, but now it's starting to change. Maybe I'll eventually achieve a little higher. And I had all those experiences that were so crazy that people wanted to know about. That led to me writing a book. So I wrote a book called Jack Moves, and it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and various places on my website. And it's about all the crazy things, my home invasions, my robberies. When I was doing that event in the cannabis world, I was traveling all over the United States and even internationally. I was almost getting arrested and having all these crazy experiences doing that stuff. It was like being a rock star. And when I lost all of that, it was very traumatic. But I was able to find myself in this other way where I'm now following stories and giving other people this exposure to their lives and telling their stories. And I'm getting to do that in a way that I'm funding all the projects. They're, micro budget projects, but I can think up any storyline that I want and I can learn about that, and I can get introduced to the experts and have my own little consultation essentially. And it is my adult education. And so I love what I do. I have a lot of freedom in my life. And I've had this positive lifestyle that I've been able to develop. People don't know how old I am. I have the greatest health that I've had since my young age. And I've been able to figure out a lot of the problems that were causing me so much difficulty throughout my life. And, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still working on plenty of things, but I'm very happy. And I appreciate all the things that have led me to where I am today.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. And I'm also going to ask you, I asked all my guests if they could share 3 good kind of coping skills, but I feel like you've shared about 50 already, so asking for 3 more is almost like asking for too much. But if there's 3 things that people can do today to get them out of that funk, to get them out of the ashes, to help them put up the bootstraps, something that you would think that would kind of, it doesn't have to be, it can be kind of out there, it can be kind of really wacky, just something that 3 things maybe you did that weren't really the normal way we coping with things. So yeah, please.
Sure. So I can give you 3 that I think are somewhat normal, and then I'll give you some wild ones. So okay. The 3 that I already mentioned that I would focus on, that I do feel like if you're being very realistic about this, you can start to achieve. You have to forgive yourself. You have to find something to work on that gives you progress. And you have to be grateful in your life about things. And so start with those 3 things. And if you're working on those things, I think you will get out of any sort of bad place that you're in. But how do you do those things? So one of the things that I do is podcasts like this, where I get to talk about my life story. And there are all these opportunities now with people that are doing things on YouTube and podcasts and even just journalists and stories. And there's an opportunity to share your life and your experience. And I think that the more people that do that, the more they start to learn about, wow, I actually have accomplished more than I gave myself credit for. And so that can be a really creative way of exploring these things and ways to be grateful.
That's awesome. I'd like to jump in there. Facebook have about 30, I think, podcast groups. They're always looking for guests. So if you're embracing your recovery and you're trying some of these tools, don't be afraid of going on and saying, yeah, I'd like to be a guest. I'd like to talk about my recovery and what's happening. And that will help you an awful lot to grow in confidence. And again, the other thing I'll say to you is try to get involved in public speaking. If you're in school and they're doing some play and they want a public speaker, put your hand up. It doesn't matter that you're scared crap. You put your hand up to public speak and you do the public speak. And no matter how bad you do, you've stood in front of an auditorium of 200 people and maybe you peed your pants or you didn't pee your pants, or you peed your pants. But you've got through standing in front of an audience for 200 people. You do the next one. And suddenly when you go for an interview, you're not that threatened, or you meet somebody famous, you'll go in confidence. So I remember public speaking, and I was taught, when you go up, you say, I don't want to be here. My teacher picked me to be here. I didn't want to be here in the first place. I'm very nervous. I want to pee my pants. I don't want to be here. I'm so scared, but I like this subject. I want to talk. I'm going to make 6 points in the subject, and then I'm going to go. And I hope you'll accept that. And then you basically talk 6 points about the subject, and you say, thank you very much for having me. You end up walking off through a standing ovation. And it's amazing. People identify with your feeling scared. Everyone in the crowd doesn't want to stand up where you are. They know exactly how you feel when you feel nervous. So own it. Say, my name is Richard. I'm here to publicly speak on football against rugby. And I am really scared. I don't want to be up here in front of anybody. I don't want people laughing at me or teasing me or saying I don't speak properly or speak too fast. I'm very nervous. But I do love football. I love rugby. And I'm going to share 6 things about both, and then you can decide. And you share your 6 things. Thank you very much, and you walk off. And you've done it. And that'll give you the confidence to stand up in front of a podcast or speak to your parents about what's going on or your loved ones and say, I'm scared. I want to commit suicide. I can't handle this. What do you do? It'll give you the courage to stand up. Sorry, I'm very sorry for this. Yeah, to speak.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I find that these audiences are wanting to celebrate you. And so even if you're nervous and all of these things, it's the kind of environment that's the absolute most forgiving. And so I do encourage people to do that too, in any way, shape, or form that you can participate, share your story, and you'll be celebrated in the end, and you'll feel a lot better.
And even if you're on a Facebook group, rather than just posting some text, post a video, post an audio, go on and say, hi, I'm feeling crap today, and post that. And just the fact that you're in front of a camera and you're letting people see you will really strengthen your confidence. You won't believe it, but it will. So if you're on a Facebook page for anxiety, and rather than putting down and saying, I'm feeling really anxious or whatever, no one tell me this is a disease because I feel crap. Say that out loud. Go to do your video on your PC and go, my name is Richard and I'm full of anxiety today. And don't tell me this is a disease because I feel shite, whatever. And just post it. And that practice will build your confidence. The next time you're meeting somebody, you'll be able to speak because you've spoken in front of an audience of 1 million people already. So this is, Jeremy, fantastic suggestion. Really, really glad. I've been very fortunate that every guest I have comes up with something fantastic. And the gratitude has been one that's happened over and over again. I mean, the last speaker spoke about baby steps. You don't have to do this all at once. So if you're going to do podcasting or you're going to attempt podcasting, don't think you have to do a presentation for 45 minutes. Go into your own group. It's anxiety, depression, whatever. Go in there and just speak for 3 minutes. You can do an audio only speak or a video only for 3 minutes, you know. If you're thinking of public speaking, go to your teacher and say, I'd like to practice. Can you give me tips about public speaking? They'll tell you which YouTube videos to watch, which Spotify to listen to. Listen to those and then practice in front of the mirror. I'm glad to be here today, blah, blah. And just practice in front of the mirror and then practice in front of your grandparents and your parents and just build up in yourself a courage to speak publicly. It'll be powerful for your recovery. Jeremy, I want to thank you very much for coming on. You've been a breath of fresh air. You're going to share a few wild, wacky ones now. So please share the wild, wacky ones with you with us.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've had all kinds of crazy experiences in my life, and some of the things that I've done are these alternative medicine stories. And so there are really wild experiences that are out there for people that are trying to recover. And so one of the ones that I did was called Cambo. And so this is a frog venom, but it's not psychedelic. So you go to this ceremony and the shaman kind of goes through all this ritual, and they do a tobacco thing where they blow this tobacco up your nose. I think that's called harpe or harape or something like that. And it's a rough experience. You do feel a little like a change in your mental attitude there, but it's not really like a drug, I would say. And it makes you really sneeze, and it gives you this like clarity through your nostrils, right? And then they burn you, and then so they give you these burns, and they put the frog venom in your burns. So there were people there that had all kinds of burns, and there was certain different areas where they were having them put the venom directly, and it ain't over. So once you get the venom into your burns, you sit for a little while, and the venom makes you vomit. And so everyone is now throwing up in these buckets. And it's if you've ever heard of trauma bonding, well, this is a very unique way of trauma bonding, and everybody's puking, and some people have to go use the toilet. Mm-hmm. And it is this whole experience of expelling everything out, and this vomiting all the toxins and all the negativity out of your life. And many people there aren't there for physical problems, really. They're there for problems that they're having kind of mentally. And the shaman says things like, the frog venom will find your problems and treat them in this way. And so there's a variety of experiences that are like this that you can do to really go to the extreme of overcoming your trauma. And, I did it one time, and I think that was probably good enough for me. some people do it over and over, and they find a huge benefit from going and experiencing this like ritually. So, I've done other things where people are taking massive doses of hallucinogenic mushrooms and having these ritualistic Native American experiences, ceremonies. And there's all kinds of things out there that can help you, psychedelic or not psychedelic, to overcome these experiences in your younger lives.
I'm really glad you said that. We're not all the same. We're built differently. The Christian thing is that we're all children of God, perfect as we are with all our defects and shortcomings, all our doubts and insecurities. Others can do what I can do, but nobody can do what I can do with my energy that makes me so unique and so special. God doesn't make mistakes. In all of creation, He's never made a mistake. He's not starting with you or I. We were all created for a meaning, with meaning and purpose in our lives, but that can only be found in the present. So we have to find some way of breaking free of the past so we can be fully present in the present. And when you're talking about this wild and wacky ones, there's a treatment center here in Thailand, out in Mae Rim, about 40 miles away from where I live. And it's a monastery. They have this program for getting people off alcohol. Now you can be a foreigner and go there. You're put into a metal cage, and you basically spend the 30 days in this metal cage. And they feed you this liquid, and it's made up of, now they say it's like paraffin and diesel, also, and all these other stuff you take, and you drink this, and it makes you vomit up. So you drink this basically every day for the first 7 days, and it just causes you to cleanse your system of all the drugs and all the alcohol. It comes out your arse, it comes out your mouth, it comes out your nose. You just have this thing where you just do a deep cleanse, and then you're fed in this cage. So again, you're given food in the cage, but you're not allowed out to use anything, and you'll stay there for as long as the monks think necessary that you're clean. So you could be there for 30 days, you could be there for 60 days, you could be there for 90 days.
Wow.
If you commit to this, you stay as long as the monks think it needs to get you clean. And you're in this little bloody metal cage, and you get fed this stuff, and you have to drink. The only thing you have to drink all this stuff, and you're crapping there in the cage and whatever, and blah, blah. And the monks come, they hose it down, they leave you there, and you give you a blanket or whatever, but then they feed you with this fruit then, like maybe just fruit, like whatever. And this is your whole thing for it's free. You pay a donation. How you can pay a donation, I don't know, but huge success. It's a huge success here in Thailand, especially with Thais. But they've had Westerners come from all over to do this, and it's like for us who've been taken care of by our mammies and daddies, whatever. It is very challenging. But the thing is, if you do it, you never want to go back. Like you're thinking, like, okay, I'm clean now. I'm not going back to have to come here again. Like that isn't happening in my lifetime. So it's more a case of like the cure is worse than the bite. Like so yeah, that kind of thing. So thank you for sharing your good responses and your wacky one too. So again, you've only got one life on this earth, and I'm 65 years of age, and I've had a bit of heart problems. I don't know if I'm going to be around for 20 years or 10 years. I don't know. But I want to make certain that the time I have on this earth, I want to be making a difference. I want to be happy, joyous, and free. I want to have people like Jeremy on my podcast carrying the message to your people like yourselves in my audience. And I like the idea of saying to Jeremy earlier on that if by chance one person on this podcast listens to this and likes what they heard, maybe they go on, they create a cure for, they go on, they get married and have descendants, and one of their descendants creates a cure for cancer or AIDS. Myself and Jeremy never get the accolades for it, but God will know. That's all that matters. We can make a difference in the lives of each other if we just decide we're going to embrace life in the present moment. And one last thing I want to finish with is we shared on TikTok yesterday. It was wonderful. The guy said, we're in the perfect spot in our lives right now because we're halfway between all of the past and all of the future. Our power is in this present moment. So the past is gone. We don't have to go there. And the future may never happen. We don't have to go there. We have this moment in time, this 1 hour, to be giants amongst men. We're in the perfect spot in our lives right now in this moment. And so I'm going to leave you with that. Jeremy, do you want to say goodbye to the gang? Thank you all for coming today, Jeremy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. For anyone that is interested in more of my stuff, my website is theskyisland.com. And you can get links to all my social media there. you can get links to my films. I've made 50 plus documentaries of all kinds of different topics. Some of them are about trauma and recovery and health and nutrition and very serious things. And some are about Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts and all kinds of wild, fun stuff. So I encourage you to explore my filmography, and my book also is on my website. So you can read about all my crazy, traumatic past. And the film about my cannabis events is called The Secret Cup. And that is also on my filmography too. The event that I do now is called the American Autoflower Cup. It's once a year in Hollywood. And we have a website for that also. And through my website, there's links to all my socials and my email, so you can contact me, and you can find pretty much everything that I'm working on through there.
Jeremy, when I'm posting this podcast, I make certain I put all your details down. It was a pleasure having you on the show, Jeremy. Thank you very much. And thank you for the audience for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure to be here.